Do you ever feel like the climate crisis, like upside down emoji, mustache man emoji, crying emoji, barfing emoji, fairy emoji, rainbow emoji? We're going to talk about the climate crisis, but it's like, it's okay. Like, you won't leave feeling miserable. Hi, I'm the bird woman, Phoebe.
And I'm Jacques,
And welcome to Do You Ever Feel Like?
where we ask the questions that everyone's thinking and no one's answering. I'm so excited to be on the pod with you right now because I feel like we actually have things to talk about.
We have shit to talk about, and also I'm like a little bit nervous for our listener because like we actually haven't spoken in a couple of days and you're getting raw. You're getting raw. Which we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes.
I know, I was thinking about that. I was like, I'm excited to talk to Phoebe because I haven't actually talked to Phoebe. I mean, not even a couple of I haven't talked to you in like a week, basically. Not like for real,
know.
right?
I know.
I know. And then I'm like, I'm super excited. And then I'm like, yes, the audience doesn't want to listen to me being like, and
well, it's not so much also the audience. It's like editing Phoebe is going to just, it's like whenever we like start going places, I'm like, what's the story here, girls? What are we doing?
What's the story, girls? I mean, I think it's a really great like insight into our relationship, actually. Because that's where I was going. This idea of like me being like, and you being like, this is you, shut up.
Oh.
Which is like essentially, you know, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Not this is you saying shut up. I'm saying like,
oh yeah.
I'm saying in response to me, like you control your life.
No, I know.
Stop talking. Like,
yeah.
That's our relationship in a nutshell.
Yeah. You're like, what about this? I'm like, I genuinely don't care. Go away.
You're like, I don't want to hear you complain about shit you can control. Get out of here. Like,
well, it's not that. It's not even just that. It's just like I think part of this has to do with, okay, hi, hello. I guess we'll just get into it. I am really in my life trying so hard to not control other people all of the time, constantly. And so when people are like coming to me, and especially people that I love and like I know I can say these things to, in sometimes the Phoebe words of shut up, which is not something I love about myself, but also it does the job. So like it works. Like I think a lot of the time, like how am I going to be a parent, like tell a child to like not say certain words, because like I tell people to shut up constantly. So that's a future problem. But I work really hard to like not control people all the time. So when stuff that Phoebe could be like, sure, I'll just puppeteer your own life for you. I'm like, no, I can't do that. Go away. Shut up. So,
yeah, I mean,
that's the pod.
And like, this is why would I be friends with anyone who wasn't be like doing that? You know what I mean? Like, I think, like, I love that about you. I love that about friendships and relationships. Like, I want to be in relationships where someone says, this is yours, not mine. Yeah. I want that. Yeah. Like, I think that that's helpful. I don't know how interesting it is on the podcast, though. Is all I'm saying.
I was just thinking, I was like, we're just gonna do friend therapy in like the first 5, but all right. Cool. Yeah. Go us.
Yeah. No, but I'm really okay. I'm really fine.
Oh, I know you are. I also know you are.
Yes, and that's always too what it is. It's like you saying back, just being showing my excellence back to me, which I appreciate.
you go.
Yeah, through however Phoebe wants to do it, which is what I'm down for. Because I also think
usually short, rude language.
Which I also think is something else, right? People say like, oh, I want that. I want relationships of honesty. I want to be called from out on my shit. I want blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And of course, we should be tender and kind with each other's hearts. But it's also like, you know, sometimes that person's language is not going to be your language. And again,
no, it's not going to be your language. And like, I get in trouble a lot in life for my very kind of, and I want to be like kind to myself. I'm not trying to be a real housewife of like, it's just who I am. I am a neurodivergent person who struggles with language. And like, so when I say things, like it is very blunt and it is very kind of literal and lateral at the same time. And like, it doesn't work for a lot of people. So I am very grateful for the people that I can say these things to. But and it works. When it works, it works.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't, like I kind of that's a part of my life where I'm just like, that's not really something I can control about myself any longer. It's really quite fascinating. I've been reading a lot about like unmasking and I don't know, just trying to be myself in the world lately. And so for I don't know if maybe I just jumped into like therapy terms really quick, but like masking is like, I don't know, pretending to be a neurotypical person and like, here's what you do when you get in line at the coffee shop and where to go and what to say and how to act, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really just kind of a bit crazy making to me to think that like there's so many therapies and I understand why they're in place in the world, but like it kind of really frustrates me that like so much advice given to like neurodiverse people is like, here's how to be and here's how to act. And it's like, well, what do you want? Do you want authenticity or do you want me to follow the script because it's one or the other? Like you can't play this game with me. So anyway.
That could be a whole pod. That's so interesting.
Oh, it's a whole pod. It's actually everyone needs to get out their do you ever bingo sheets today because we have a that's a whole other pod. Like pyramid at play today.
Ooh.
But before we get into it, I wanted to ask you how you are.
Oh, I wanted to ask you the same thing. I was about to say the same thing.
No.
Okay, fine.
My turn.
How I am. I am really stepping in. Here we go. I am really stepping into a point in my life where I'm like, no, Jacqueline, you actually are a boss. Like
I love that.
Like, actually, you are a boss, bitch. And
yeah.
And like
I don't know why I'm laughing so much. I think it's just
I know why you're laughing.
Why? Because I'm like, I've had enough of you and your shit. I'm like, yeah, okay.
You've had enough of me and my shit. I think you've had enough of me and my shit, but also I think you're laughing because, like, I don't know, 5 minutes from now I might feel differently. I don't know.
Well, I think it's always like, whenever a friend tells me something, they're like, I've just had this like revelation. I'm like, bitch, you didn't have to go to therapy. I could have just told you if you asked.
No, that's what I mean. Like you being over my shit. Like you're like,
I'm like, yes, I am very keenly aware.
You're very keenly aware that Jacqueline is a boss, actually. Yeah. So I think here's what that means though, for me. I think what it means for me is a few things. Being fine with work.
I know.
I think it's about being fine with work. Again, you know all these things. We can just hang up and go away. Like we don't need to talk to each other.
I know. I know. Wow. I know. Wow. Ah! I'm just screaming. Ah! Yeah, I love that.
Like I'm in like I was just talking to a friend who of course we're always on the same together. And they were like, this is my season of work. And that's just what it is.
It's so funny you're saying this because I was just writing about, so I'm taking a little bit of sabbatical this summer. Well, we both are. But it's not to lay on a beach necessarily. Like that's kind of what I wanted, but it's what I think I have wanted is rest, but it's actually not true. Like what I am wanting is like deep creation and like research and like library stacks and like and so it's not, I think we kind of conflate like work with like hard, but like actually what I'm wanting, and especially as a creative person, like creating is like second nature to me. I can do it with my eyes closed. I can do it. I'll do it long after I'm dead as well. You know, like I think we kind of conflate like, I don't know, like effort in a sense, or like lack of ease or something like that. Anyway, so like I'm writing like my like Phoebe sabbatical like boundaries for myself, and it's like really kind of quite hard to put down on paper because it's like it's kind of just vibes.
It's just vibes.
It's just
dusty bookshelves.
Yeah. If the vibes can be maintained, it's a yes. If it harshes the vibes, then it's a no. Yeah. I'm sorry, my man. Like that's the only way. And like it's very day to day. There's a temperature control. It's vibes. You're in your work season. You're a boss. I'm about vibes.
I'm truly like really like I'm like, oh wow. And I can see everything so clearly. It's coming to me. And I think this is complicated, but I think that I wouldn't have taken advantage of certain things that would have come my way, you know, in the past out of for some bullshit reason, honestly. Like for some I'm trying to not like judge myself too much, but for some like it just feels laughable to me now that at some point I ever didn't take the opportunities that were coming to me. And I was just kind of like, no, that's not it. Because actually anything can really be it if you are like moving through life the way you want to. Like actually literally anything can be it. Like,
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think I guess it's like I said, it's about vibes.
Yes. It's like, maybe it's the vibe. Like, yes. Like
it's just vibes.
I would have never, like, people come to me now and I had an issue with okay. Oh my God. This is a lot. This is what I'm saying. This is what the people are getting. This is what I'm saying. Like 5.
They're getting raw file. They got raw file.
like I went through this whole thing last week where I discovered all the different ways that I can say no. Right. And I'm trying to put it out there in the world. It's coming soon. I promise. But like, point is that like, it's actually not all the ways to say no. It's all the ways to not say yes. And like, I think I've then been experimenting with like, okay, but is it a yes? And because I live in the now, which is like also freaking me out with the stuff you keep telling me. Get there later. Like I live in the now so much of like, oh, well, if I can't do this right now, I can't do it at all. And actually, that's not true, Jacqueline. Like you can say to someone, yes, beautiful idea. I would love to support this project. How about next spring? And like, when you actually are living in a way where you believe and trust in yourself, you know what I'm saying? That like the next spring is actually, it like sits in you so much better. And like before, I think I was not taking advantage, quote unquote, of certain things coming my way because I was like, oh, I can't fit it into the now. And it's like, you don't have to fit it into the now. That thing isn't going to go away because it's even if it goes away in whatever container it's being presented to you, it's going to come back some other way.
Right. Because this is when I was saying to you, I was like, you're being Spider-Man, you're wormhole jumping, you're existing on many timelines at the same time instead of just one wormhole.
Yes.
One timeline, one future, but just at a time. Like, this is what I think the other thing is like when we say no to something, or even in setting up like the sabbatical for myself, it's felt very like, it feels very kind of vulnerable to talk about, but I'm like, why? Because I don't really kind of give a shit, but I think it's just because I don't have a very clear answer for somebody, and like that, like I don't have like a thing that I can tell you, like package up in a nice way and be like, here's this thing I'm doing, blah 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 blah. Here's like a very clean definition of this word. Like, I'm just, like I said, I'm going on vibes, I'm going on feels, and like that's like the hardest thing to ever try and translate from someone. So
yeah,
hot dog.
I think I'm a boss, but I can decide.
She's a boss.
But I can decide how to be a boss. And
yeah. Oh yes.
I can decide how to be a boss, which is so important. And like, you will always be Jacqueline. Like, it's not going to go away, this thing.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally, this is the most raw. Like, I'm not even speaking in real sentences, actually, because we don't have to actually speak in real sentences when we talk to each other.
I know. It's quite gross. It's quite gross.
Anyways, how are you?
Great. I'm actually also fine and great. Actually, everything has been going insane, but everything's been going insane. I'm like, did somebody put out some kind of like inconveniencing curse out in the world? Did somebody, like, what is going on? Like, things are delayed, interruptions are everywhere, they're constant, accidents, like just constant. It's been constant in my life for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks now. And I kind of keep citing to myself that I'm like, oh, well, I'm okay because like I've built a life that's like okay. I can like deal with inconveniences and stuff. But I think that is fine for now. And it's not, I don't know, like this, like you can like only go to like so many massages and like yoga and therapy before you actually have to like feel a feeling. And so furthermore, I kind of keep thinking like going away in like basically a week and like 10 days. And I'm like, oh, I can't just wait to like be like sitting on a patio somewhere to like be okay, you know? Like I can't just like hold on to that. Like I have to like actually deal with myself right now. I can't just like do a breathing exercise to like get through anxiety. I have to like find the feeling underneath it. Which brings me to Sex in the City.
Because everything,
all roads lead back to Sex in the City. I didn't even really plan on this, but you and I, well, also another reason why we don't need to talk, you and I are both on it, like whatever. I mean, I guess you guys just, I've been rewatching Sex in the City since just a constant rewatch, you know? I remember watching that show when I would babysit, and you okay? you okay? What?
I was trying to not laugh because I felt like performance-wise that joke was funnier without a laugh.
Oh. But you didn't do a good job. You were just like,
it was terrible. But I was like, no, the synth needs to linger on its own. That's funnier without me responding. And then I couldn't hold it in. Anyways, whatever.
It looked like you were choking.
Oh, God. You're like, should we stop? Are you
Yeah,
dying?
is this the end? My podcasting partner is gone. But rewatching Sex and the City, I don't even want to call it a rewatch. Like I said, I've just been rewatching Sex and the City since time immemorial. But then I realized the new season of And Just Like That is coming up. And so I'm wondering, I was like, should I rewatch that? And I was like, I can't because my eyeballs will light on fire. But then I had a thought last night.
Ooh, like
As
Carrie.
Yes.
Carrie has.
Oh my God. Honestly, it's so fucking embarrassing, like watching that show and being like, this is literally me writing my Substack. Like I literally stand at a window in my pajamas and like smoke.
And you're
I
like,
think that's what
and
I'm
then
doing
I
at the
had a
very
thought.
least. Yeah. It's like, it's so fucking embarrassing. Simon just roasts me the entire time. I fucking wish that journalism was in the state that it was in. Like, I want Carrie Bradshaw's job. I know we all do, but I really do. I miss the boat. It's so upsetting. I'm always so curious what deadline she has. She's always like, there's always like a lofty deadline.
Oh yeah, she's like,
and I'm
I
like,
have a deadline.
I have a deadline to meet, and it's like, but would it not be the same deadline all of the time? I have so many questions.
Yes.
Anyway, but watching Sex and the City last night, and I'm like, oh, that's me. Miranda's me. Charlotte's me. Samantha's me. Carrie's me. Carrie's you. That's so and so friend. Oh, this is a part of me here. And then I realized my epiphany. Sex in the City is parts work. It's actually therapy. It's actually internal family systems.
Yes.
So that's where I'm at. That's how I am actually. I'm coping via the parts, my internalized Carrie Bradshaw, etc.
Ooh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Archetypes, etc.
I mean, this is why we have to have Michelle on working on it. But so that's the Kardashians. That's why we love the Kardashians.
My God, is it the Kardashians? Yes. Is it ever? Yes. It's 100%. Yeah, all of this stuff is parts work. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, this is actually giving me so many thoughts. Like, this is maybe I love sitting down. Saturday mornings is my Kardashian time. It's so delicious to me. Switching on reality TV show on a Saturday morning, drugs.
Decadent.
Pure drugs. Mm-hmm. Lovely, lovely.
Ooh, I love this. Yes, and like I think kind of what I was saying before is parts work. Like, yes, this idea of like I'm a boss and I can not use my adapted family style and use my like actual authentic like driver's seat Jacqueline. Yes. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And figure out where those parts of me work and exist and like when to pull out who, when. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think is yes.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, that's fun. Oh, well, aren't we on to something?
We need write that down. Write that down.
I don't know. What are you writing down?
Aren't we on to something? Down? That's a title of something.
Oh. Book number 65. But I don't even know how to make this transition today. I don't even know how to stick this landing, but that's kind of the point. Because my question is, do you ever feel like the climate crisis, like upside down emoji, mustache man emoji, crying emoji, barfing emoji, fairy emoji, rainbow emoji, disassociated emoji, invisible emoji, melting emoji, etc., 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 etc.
Do you ever feel like the climate crisis is parts work?
This is where, okay, it's just ringing in my head still, but that hilarious comments, like, I can't tell if this podcast is a skit of a podcast or not. It's very much that.
Okay.
Ay.
Do you ever feel like the climate crisis is too much?
It's only deep breath. And it's so funny. And like trying to write this, like, I don't even know how to start this podcast because it's like, we're going to talk about the climate crisis, but it's like, it's okay. Like, we're not going, it's like, it'll be fun. Like, don't worry. Like, you won't leave feeling miserable. Cause I think that's like just how it's so arresting to even say those words.
Yeah. Maybe like in relationship to work this season, it's like, do you ever feel like the climate crisis is too much work?
Oh, it's too much work. It's impossible work. That's what it's like. It feels like insurmountable.
That's good.
Work.
Yeah.
It's too much. And I think it's really interesting that like, so it's like, yeah, I in this episode, we're going to talk about the climate crisis, but I promise it's not sad. And, why is it that we don't feel like we can deal with this thing that's so arresting, that's like so anxiety inducing? But I wanted to ask you a question before we start. A question on top of my question. In a lot of my research for our episode today, I dove into, there's this really great series. Oh, let me just see if my brain can do this. Lena Norms on YouTube. She has a series called Positive Panic. I think that's what it is. She talks about the climate crisis in kind of a not so gaslighty way, but in a like, here, how do we kind of continue to talk about this and how do we do things? But she always asks her guests this really interesting question. I'm going to ask you, Jacqueline. How often do you talk about the climate crisis with your friends?
With my friends?
With anybody. How often do you talk about the climate crisis?
I hate questions like this. Often.
Really? Actually?
I mean, this is what does that mean? Like, does it mean
how often, or not even, it doesn't, maybe not often, but like, what are the conversations? I'm just curious about like what are you talking about when you're talking about this?
Yeah. So I think that is, yeah. Okay. So am I sitting down, out to breakfast with my friends and discussing the details of the climate crisis and like the disparities and like blah, blah, blah? No. Am I, making one-sided off comments to my partner about like taking the reusable bag to the grocery store? Yes, I am. So, this I think is the question, right? Do I think about the climate crisis often? Yeah, I do. Do I have conversation or impactful change because of that thought? No, I don't.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because I think if I were to ask, I would say the exact same thing. I would answer that question the exact same way. How often am I outraged and getting mad and having what I would not consider a conversation? Oh, isn't it so horrible? Blah, blah, blah. Right. Whereas having part of, and it's funny as well. Like I wasn't going to write this episode because it's like the last one before we go on summer break. Surprise, listener. We're going to go on summer break.
Surprise.
We'll talk about
climate
it later.
Crisis. Going on summer break.
And I wasn't going to do that. I was like, I don't want to just leave people. It's like our last episode before we go on break. What do I want to leave people with? I want to leave with a fun thing. And I was trying to write a fun episode and it wasn't happening because the sky was yellow for 7 days here last week. And it hurt my lungs to go outside. And my jacket smells like I was sitting in front of a bonfire for an evening still. And I live in a place in the world where I can't think of a better place to be actually in the world, that is like more safe and protected, and even in disaster, pr- fine, inconvenienced actually by
Mm-hmm.
it. um and so I was trying not to write this episode, but I think this is kind of the problem. Is it's so anxiety inducing, it's so outragey, it's so like blood pressure level 1000, that we don't actually listen to the podcast or write the podcast or do the research or have the conversation or all of things. So I was very
Mm-hmm.
much prepared to do the same thing that I do all of the time, of just watch a documentary and then continue on with my life like I don't have that information ingested into myself anymore, and so that I can just spit facts out at other people and we can be outraged together and feel like that does something, or pass it off as like, well, what can we do, and like,
Yeah.
and move on.
Yeah.
um
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm. Mm. This is juicy.
So I think I wanted to talk about eco anxiety, because I was thinking about it, and I've heard this word thrown around a lot. Obviously, like, I think it's like, ooh, it would be interesting. It would have been interesting to do like a frequency of word search kind of thing.
Mm.
But obviously within like the last couple of days, everywhere I went, everyone's like, eco anxiety, it's a real anxiety, it's a real kind of thing. And
Mm.
yes and no. Anxiety and fear are not the same. They're like linked but different. And so I think of let me back up. I think it feels so terrifying and so out of control that we have the potential to generate a generation of total apathy, to the point where things never change, and
Mm.
we don't take responsibility for individual action at a certain point. And I really want to challenge that. So I want to talk about what's kind of happening. So yes, eco anxiety is a thing. However, it is not a diagnosable anxiety, and people have been wondering for like the last couple of years if it's like a thing that should be talked about more. And so
Mm.
what kind of happens in or should it be something that's diagnosable? But part of the problem, and obviously I'm not a mental health expert, but these are my layman's terms, but part of the problem is anxiety is like this like hangover or leftover bit of so your amygdala is like the thing that sends signals to your brain, your hypothalamus, that says like, yo, I'm not cool here. And so that's the thing that's sending signals to your brain when there's like a tiger in front of you, and that tells you to run. And part of what eco anxiety and eco fear are kind of like battling at the same time are there isn't a bear in our living rooms. I like to like think of Simon and I in our house refer to like, am I fine, or do I feel like a peacock is chasing me kind of thing? Like, is there a
Oh,
peacock in the house or not?
that's very specific.
There's like some sort of meme. I can't remember where it came from, but there's like a meme of like a peacock chasing a child, and I'm like, that's
fucking
what
terrifying.
that feels like.
Yeah. Being like corralled by a peacock. Yeah.
Yeah. And so being anxious is telling somebody who's just been like, or somebody having a fear of something is telling somebody who's experiencing anxiety and fear, who's just been stabbed, to do some breathing exercises instead. Have like, if there is a bear in your house, just CBT your way through it. Like, you'll be fine. But eco anxiety, there is a bear in the living room in a sense, and there isn't a bear in the living room in a sense, right? Like, there is a real thing that is happening, but we can't run from it. And in fact, running from it, this response that our amygdala is like, I am in danger, let's get out of here, that's sending it to our hypothalamus. Our bodies don't know the difference between not a threat and a long-term threat. And so we just have this conniption, right? And this conniption is not unwarranted, but it's also the thing that I think our generations from now will hunt us down for if we don't do something about it. And so this anxiety actually gets in the way of us being able to do things. And so what is needed after anxiety is a real what's the word? Like discovery of how you feel. Bringing it back to parts work. Like, what is actually, how do you feel in that fear? How do you feel in that anxiety? What is underneath these things? What is the thing that thinks it's being attacked? And how can we like get to that source? And so that's what I think is happening when we're talking, quote unquote, talking about the climate crisis, is we're all feeding off of each other in that energy of like, aren't you outraged? I'm outraged. Like, blah, 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 plastic bag, like blah, 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 straw, blah, 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 wildfire, blah, 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 gas prices, you know? And it's just reactions on top of each other, which are very warranted. Like, yes, there's a bear in the living room, and like, yes, there is not. I had to take a sip of water.
That's so interesting in the sense of like the evolutionary components of trauma, right? Or like, which I think is kind of like, yeah. Yeah, like how do we respond in this way, like to this actual threat, but within this like container of like modern society, like 2023.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like,
yeah,
we aren't living anymore like a bear can attack us in the middle of the night. Like that's not, but
yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Well, and I think this is where privilege comes into it, right? Where like we get to have this really intense response of fear, and you are only responding in that moment. That's only happening because you felt safe before that, right? Like we felt okay. And so I think this is where like the intersection of privilege is really important. And we know privilege is only good if we actually do something, right? And so I was looking, I found this quote that I think is attributed to Camus, but like I'm not exactly sure. But like I'm gonna, maybe Camus, people talk about this a lot, but being alive is to be in a state of emergency, so to speak. And so if it isn't this, it's something else. And aren't we so lucky that we do have opportunities where we do feel safe, where we do feel respite, where we do feel like we are able to potentially handle a danger, even if it is approaching us. And maybe from that place, like maybe there, like action. Because I don't know, I don't think like, in this podcast, I don't think I have any thoughts about how to not feel like this really intense reaction to things, because I feel it constantly. Like I feel that when I go to the grocery store, I feel that when I see cars idling outside, like I see that in other people's actions. Like I feel that thing constantly. I feel that when I go to vote, but it's out. So we'll talk about how to things get better. But I was curious about I don't know, like your personal reaction to those things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, this conversation is complicated, but it's interesting that we're talking about this in this point in my life because of the work I've been doing with brushwood. And I'm just I want to keep going in the conversation because I think I have contribution in that regard. But I don't know where we're going, so keep going.
That's interesting.
I've never worked for, okay, so here's my experience. I'm like, we're just going to talk about Brushwood. Brushwood, sponsor the pod. Anyways, no, I'm kidding. Don't sponsor the pod. No. Brushwood's amazing, and the stuff that they're doing is incredible. And I'm really proud to be a part of it. It's a lot of work, but I'm really proud to be a part of it. And I'm not a environmental environmentalist. I've never really been in the environmental justice world. I don't really, this is not something that I've ever really been exposed to. Even like the idea of being in nature, like, was not cultivated in my, like, yeah. Anyways,
it's interesting that you're saying you using the word environment. I don't know why I didn't Google this earlier, but you saying you're not a quote unquote, you're not an environmentalist is very interesting to me, because the definition of environmentalist is a person who is concerned or advocates for the protection of the environment. Oh. And I would argue that is most people I talk to. And I think this is kind of not like just to use a social movement example.
Interesting.
Like I think this is similar when we use the word ally, or when we use the word or when people had that awakening in June 2020 as part of the George Floyd protest. I think it really awakened people that they actually are what's the word, activists, in a sense. Like, being an activist doesn't mean you were like going to political speaking in front of politicians necessarily, right. Or it doesn't mean you are a lawyer, or it doesn't mean it's your full-time job. I just think that's like an interesting language choice, that despite your work in a very, like, even though you work for an organization that has environmentalism at the front of it, like not calling yourself an environment. I just was interesting. I didn't Google that word beforehand.
Interesting. Okay. See, yeah, that's really fascinating, because, and I think what I was going to say was this idea, there's so much to say, this idea of, okay. So if I were to close my eyes, and this is my bias, if I were to close my eyes and think about who is an environmentalist, right? That is a very specific picture in my brain. Right.
Exactly.
Like, I am like crunchy white guy in a Patagonia, like with like, you know what I mean? Like, that is like what I'm thinking of. And so I think that's kind of interesting, right? In the sense of, within the work of environmentalism, there of course are systems and structures at play that keep like the work, if you will, and the concern, or the like whatever, there's intersections happening, and there's privilege in in it, and there's a reason why I think of a white guy in a Patagonia, is what I'm saying. Like, that has been curated in a specific way because of racism, because of white supremacy, because of capitalism, blah, 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 blah. Right. So anyways, and I think, so my point that I was going to make was, because I don't identify with that person, like, I don't ascribe, like, I don't think I ascribe to that. Like, I don't think that I, quote unquote, am an environmentalist, or I don't think that I even belong in the environmental justice, like, movement. Right. And like, what I've learned from working with Brushwood is actually that I am an environmentalist, and actually that I actually belong in the environmental justice space. Right.
Yeah.
And like, also that the people who are actually like truly at the center of the environmental justice space are not white guys in Patagonias. You know what I mean? No. And so, and I didn't know that, I didn't have any kind of understanding of that. Anyways, I don't know where that was going, but that was my point.
No, it's interesting that you say, well, I think that there's this like, social like license, so to speak, or like kind of cachet of like who this work is for and who this is for not, and where blame and shame go. very pointedly. So like when we are outraged, like, so here in Canada, they've just banned single-use plastics, but it's like, it makes my fucking head spin the way that this has gone about. It's like quite sick and maddening. Instead of like a plastic bag available for you at the grocery store, they now have like these like oh my god, what's that type of like it's just another type of plastic. It's a plastic fabric
that you can't do
now
anything with those
instead,
bags, and then you
that
just
you
like
can't do
collect them.
anything with it.
Yes. Yes.
And so they cost money.
This is what
They're
Phoebe's talking about, is my
horrible.
outrage right now that I'm not going to do anything about. Right? Yes. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, maybe you might, because we're not done yet. They're horrible. But that is that thing I feel. This is the thing I feel when I'm at the grocery store and I see these fucking bags that drive me fucking nuts. And I think of Justin Trudeau and his very nice hair, and I get furious. And there's a certain social license of that is okay. That is okay for me to be mad at this thing. And so what I'll vote way, or I'll do something else, but like this bag is being thrust upon me, and this is how I feel right now. And I think even there's a stat that people throw around a whole bunch, like 100% of this was like back in 2017, I think. 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions. This is like a thing I hear all of the time. I think we've heard thrown around for a lot. And so it's kind of like, well, not my problem, baby. Like, what can I do? You know, Kim K and Taylor Swift are still flying around on their private jets. Like, billionaires are the thing that's like blowing everyone else's shit up. Like, what can we do? And that, like, siphoning off emotions, like blame, who to blame and whose problem it is. Like, you know, Mother Brene Brown tells us, we know that like shame is not a helpful tool. And I think that's just like exactly what we do to ourselves and exactly what we do to each other in those moments of seeing the like truly horrifying use of quote unquote not a single use plastic bag. But I think if we were to just stay with that feeling for a second, or not even just feeling, that thought of like 100 companies, only 100 companies are responsible for 71% of the world's global emissions. Who's buying the shit that these companies are selling?
Yeah.
Like, who's consuming the stuff? Like, at the end of the day, there is a certain, I don't believe only individual actions are what is needed. And I have compiled a list of things that we can do. Don't you worry, listener and Jacqueline.
Great.
I am refusing to leave. I'm refusing for us to stay in this like pointing of fingers. And to your point about privilege as well, I think that reaction is similarly very privileged, to be like, well, not my problem. I can't do anything about it. I'm just trying to drive my car to work. I'm just trying to use my phone. Like, I can't help where I live or what I try to do.
Yeah.
You know, which like I see and feel you, baby. And also,
yeah. And something that I think that is so important in this conversation, and again, I would not know about this framing or anything without working at Brushwood. Everybody go check out Brushwood.
Yes, you should. Jacqueline just worked on a beautiful report with Brushwood that we should all go and read.
Thank you. What they're trying to do is center in this conversation of environmental and social justice assets and like what we already are doing and what we can do, and like the resilient positivity of community. And actually here are all of the things that that this community is already doing. Here are ways that we can contribute. And what I think is interesting in that the way that Brushwood is thinking about this report is that there's a health equity report coming out from Brushwood this summer. And I think the ways that they've even thought about the creation of this thing and like how, like literally like how this 80-page report is even framed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is not leading with, look at all these disparities, look how terrible this is, look at all these health
Mm-hmm.
issues because of these environmental problems, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what you can do about it. Here's what's important. Here are the
Yeah.
recommendations. They're flipping it. They're saying, hey, look at what we're doing. Look at what we're already doing. Look at these recommendations.
Yeah.
Look how amazing the
Yes.
world is.
Yes.
Look how amazing people
Yes.
are. You know, we can
Yes.
keep going and like we can, you
Yeah.
know, and also this is why this is so important. And I think that framing, like
Mm-hmm.
leading with,
Mm-hmm.
we are powerful and we can,
Yes.
and community, response is important, and all the assets that
Mm-hmm.
everyone has to like center that is
Yeah.
actually what gets people excited to
Yeah.
and feel empowered and not disempowered by the
Yeah.
data, the information, etc. And I
Yeah.
think maybe that's where we lose folks, right? Is exactly like, well, what can I do?
100%.
Because this seems like this insurmountable thing. And it's like,
Yes.
actually, if we all shared the positive about what's already happening, then this
Mm-hmm.
insurmountable thing maybe wouldn't translate like that. I don't know.
Well, I think it's definitely, I mean, I numbers are only meaningful because we give them meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's that part of data. But then the other thing I think about, and it was really interesting, I was thinking, as I was looking at like climate anxiety, like as a term yesterday, I found this really interesting article by in the Scientific American, written by Sarah Jacqueline Ray.
Mm.
It's called "Climate Anxiety is an overwhelmingly white phenomenon." And it was making me think so much about, like, when we think about privilege, like when we
Mm-hmm.
think about all of these things, it's like, who feels safe, who gets to have this opportunity of outrage at the grocery store, and then who gets to just chalk it up and actually not really have their life impacted
Yeah.
at all. Because
Mm-hmm.
like we've seen, we are seeing is happening. Like I just outlined, my life is just inconvenienced by the weather,
Mm-hmm.
and so I wanted to read this quote up because I think it's really interesting, and we'll link the um, article in the show notes. But the white response to climate change is literally suffocating people of color. Climate anxiety can operate like white fragility, sucking up all the oxygen in the room and devoting resources towards appeasing the dominant group. As climate refugees are framed as a climate security threat, will the climate anxious recognize their role in displacing people from around the globe? Will they be able to see their own fates tied to the fates of the disposed? Or will they hoard resources, limit the rights of the most effective, and seek to save only their own? Deluded that the xenophobic strategy will save them, how can we make sure that climate anxiety is harnessed for climate justice? And I think that's exactly what we're talking about when this, like, the intersection of privilege comes into play here, where it's like, oh, I'm having a big emotion and I don't feel good. It's like
Mm-hmm.
literally calling the cops on ourselves. It's like
Mm-hmm.
literally carrying ourselves into, like, to get back in line. Like, do
Mm.
not have a conniption about the grocery bags because for XYZ amount of reasons, because or what does it even do, blah blah blah. And it's just, like, again, this social currency
Mm.
of like, well, I can't do anything, it's not my fucking
Mm.
problem, like, literally kills people, is literally killing people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like, I come back to this thing, it's like, not our fault, is our problem, like, is very much our problem.
Yes. Yes. In the
Mm-hmm.
sense, in the same idea of like when we talk about trauma, right? Or when we talk about,
Yeah.
any manifestations of like threat, like not
Mm-hmm.
our problem is our
Mm-hmm.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, totally. And I think, yeah, now I'm like, people need to read this report. I should put a link in the
Yes, you should.
in the Google document so that people can sign up to get their copy of this report. Because it's very interesting, and exactly like when you say literally killing people, it's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like your zip code can be a determinant on whether or
Mm-hmm.
not you
Mm-hmm.
have a longer life expectancy than someone
Yeah.
who literally lives 5 miles away from you. Like that
Oh yeah.
is not okay. Like,
no, it's not okay. It's not okay. And it's not okay for people to learn that information and to not do anything with it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's not okay for us to watch a documentary. Like, how long ago did that oh my gosh, what is that?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that documentary on like clothing is the one I'm thinking about. Like, it's not okay for us to learn that, you know, dye runoffs go into water and is contaminating our water resources in the world. It's not okay for us to learn that working in factories that where we buy our clothing is that have manufactured our clothing, where people aren't paid well and there's hazardous work environments, and we know that, you know, our clothing is made out of plastic and doesn't fucking rot. And when we donate it to like, it's not okay for us to learn this information and to not start doing something about it. So
I really want to do something about it. I also want to make the point that, like, I'm like, this is a good point to make, that we can all actually have a better quality of life. Like, if from the point that you're inconvenienced or the point that this is life-threatening, why wouldn't you want to have a better quality of life? Yeah. Whether it's like, oh, now I don't have to throw away my shirt because the investment of the money, or like whatever, like something insignificant and futile like that, right? To like people being able to grow up, you know, with access to green and blue spaces. You know what I mean? Like, whatever the thing is, like, don't we all want to live better?
Yeah.
Not even.
Well, and I think it's really funny you bring that up. Like, I saw a couple of headlines last week where it was like houses for sale like doubled or tripled in New York City last week when the wildfire smoke was going on, and people were citing, like, they're like, well, I'm getting out of here if the city's gonna stink like this every summer. And it's like, global means everybody. Like, no matter if the whole world's on fire, it's going to be real stinky. Like, no houses on a dead planet. Like, what do we think this means?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like the cognitive dissonance is real. Okay, but what can we do?
I'm excited.
What can we do, Jacqueline? We can talk about it. And when we talk about it, I really actually mean talking about it with our friends. Like, actually wondering how we feel. Actually asking, like, who did you vote for? Who's a politician that's got a really great, you know, green plan right now? Who's a politician that's like really concerned? And, you know, for example, like in where I live in Hamilton, they declared a climate emergency a couple of years ago. And like part of the election that we just had here was like, I was like, okay, if we declared a climate emergency, like all action should be informed by that now. Like all things should contribute towards lowering our ecological footprint, our greenhouse gas emissions. And so, like, actually having these conversations. I think additionally as well, and like, so I'm going to get into a table of things that we can do. It's a really interesting resource, but I do think sitting down and researching for yourself and taking a look, you know, privilege asks us, you know, where am I and what do I have access to, and what can I share? And so sitting down and with yourself and being like, oh, maybe I have money. Maybe I have time. Maybe I have, I don't know, the color of my skin is beneficial for me to like go into like politic in front of people or with me. Like, there are many intersections, there are many ways in which we can give, or not just give, but explore. Curiosity, creativity, I think is the guide here. And choose to find what works for you, find what you're curious about. And I'll just speak for like self, I can only ever speak from my experience. I read a book. I talk about it all the time. I read Jonathan Safran Foer's We Are the Weather, maybe like a little over a year ago. And that was like information, because I wanted to learn like how do our individual impacts do our individual actions impact the weather?
Mm-hmm.
And he basically goes on to talk about like, you know, the meat industry and animal agriculture industry, among a couple of other things. But it is very interesting. And like that was, I felt like I could be curious enough to change part of my diet. And I didn't go into it thinking I would eat vegan, but now I do. But I don't think we need to gear switch so hard in either direction. Like I think this is like the other thing that people get really hung up on. It's like, well, I'm not interested in eating vegan 100% of the time. I'm not interested in, you know, wearing Patagonia and living in the mountains and eating grass for the rest of my life. Like I like XYZ lifestyle. And I don't think there is a point in our very short future where I don't think we will have a choice about what we can or can't, like what actions we can do or things that we can eat. And so I think starting to make small changes in our individual lives is like, I don't think it needs to be 100%. Like I don't think we all need to adopt 3/4 zips.
Yeah. No.
or sorry, just quarter zips into our lives. A 3/4 zip would be the worst. Okay, so there's this really interesting resource I will link below. It's called, it is the Drawn Down Organization's Table of Solutions.
Oh, okay.
So they have, you would extra find this interesting, I actually think. But they have presented individual solutions reviewed and assessed by Project Drawdown using their relevant sectors and their impact on reducing heat trapping gases. The list is extensive but not exhaustive, and we continue to add to it as a living project. Project Drawdown uses different scenarios to assess what to determine global efforts to address climate change might look like. Both scenarios are shown here as plausible and economically realistic. Drawdown scenario 1 is a rough line with 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise by 2100, while drawdown scenario 2 is roughly in line with a 1.5 degree Celsius temperature rise at the century's end. So it kind of measures what is impacting the most and where we can find the most impacts, and it lists a bunch of solutions. So the top two are that they have measured are reduced food waste and plant-rich diets. But if we go down, it's things like inventions, like that things that have people and small things like LED lighting and different types of insulation, public transportation, carpooling, like properly recycling, offshore wind turbines, like things that are in the world already, but that if we continue to adopt, aka alternative cement, and geothermal power and recycled metals and improved cattle feed, like these are making huge dents in slowing down the greenhouse gas emissions. Not just slowing down, well, slowing down temperature rise, but also it's very interesting. It's very, 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 very interesting. And so I think part of like, what can you do really is so individual and like really needs to ask ourselves, like, what do I want to learn about and what information can I no longer just have in my head?
Yeah.
And I can't divorce myself from knowing this any longer.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, like what are you what are you kind of like already motivated by? Because there is it sounds like, right, like a paired solution for this issue with what you are motivated by. You know what I mean? Like, whether it's like, I mean, literally, like if you're like if your thing is literacy, right? Or if your thing is
absolutely,
you know, anti-racism, or if your thing is mental health, or if your thing is whatever, like there is something, it's all related. Like there is something, you know, that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, and I think, you know, like it was making me think, I'm like, oh, well, in the future, we're going to need a lot more creativity to get us out of these, and not just in the future, right now. Right now, we are going to need a lot of creativity, and that is what this table of solutions is really, I think, showing as me as a table of inventions and solutions and creativity. I think that's amazing. But our own creativity is required for us to find interest and not just like idle our cars.
Yes.
or think that, you know, I don't know, or plastic, or not using a plastic cup. Or make never using a plastic cup your whole fucking vibe. Like, you know what I mean? Like if that's what you want to do. But I do think that there is I do think, and unfortunately, like the evidence does show that like individual action, a drop in, like, yes, you're only a drop in the ocean, but like the ocean is made of drops.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you said, like, you know, really it's going to require creativity because of, you know, everything you and I care about when it comes to creativity. And if you're like getting to this point of the episode and you don't already know what our manifesto is, like, I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, like I think what's so interesting when we talk about like have the conversation is with the friends, right? Kind of goes back to, you know, everything that we're saying when we're identifying feelings, right? Because it's like, actually, yes, actually have the conversation at brunch with friends. But I think something that I've taken away from this conversation today that I know that I can already do is when someone brings up any of these things, you know, at the dinner table, like whatever, you know, here or there, to respond with, how does that make you feel?
Yeah.
Because like actually having conversation that is a little bit, like you're saying, a step after, right? The outrage is, okay, but how does that make you feel? Like, how does that land in your body and in your nervous system? And I think the only place, I don't think the only place that creativity comes from, as we know, and creative solution comes from, and innovation comes from, is feelings, is how do you feel?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Is how do you feel? And I think in the, not in the inverse, as well as, like, I really do think at brunch we need to be asking each other what we're doing about it.
Yes.
Like,
absolutely. Absolutely. I think there is
no more just, yeah, I personally can no longer learn new information and just keep going.
Yeah. And I totally hear that. And I think that's so true. And I think I'm definitely going to adopt that as well after this conversation. But I think that we kind of go like, it's like a fallback, right? Where we kind of go, I know it's terrible. But instead of saying, I know it's terrible, if we said, but how do we feel about it? Like, I actually think that's like that is the entry point, you know, because to just respond and say, oh, like, I know it's so terrible. Like, ugh, I feel so sad too. But if I had someone say to me, how do you really actually feel about it? That would totally frame it differently to me. I don't know. How do we feel about it and what are we going to do?
How do you feel about what are you going to do? This table of solutions is like honestly quite amazing to me. One of the things that Lena Norms, I'm saying Lena Norms, I don't know if that is, I think that might just be like a handle of some sorts, but anyway. But she suggested one of her videos looking at this table of solutions and like spell your name with it, like pick one.
Oh,
like
cool.
Pick one to just like investigate, like, because it is long and like they cite as well, like never ending kind of thing. It's fascinating.
Wow.
So there we go. Like, I for perchance could get into perennial staple crops. Ugh, sounds very interesting.
Yes, you know? And if you happen to listen to us and you're coming from the state of Illinois or Chicago, please go in the show notes and sign up to read this report. Actually, even if you're not, sign up to read this report that's coming out from the Accelerator team at Brushwood, because it also has recommendations of things that we can do, recommendation categories, and then smaller recommendations that, again, we're not asking, like, some of these things are so doable and easy.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it too is just like, let's stop gaslighting ourselves that we don't see all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like for me, my individual actions help me when I am stressed out about the grocery bags, go like, okay, but there is, I actually feel empowered. I actually feel like there's something that we can be doing. And I don't think it's so much about identity. You know, I am white-haired Patagonia man.
Right.
It's about my impact.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Or our impact as well. So, any other thoughts?
No.
We're going to go on a little summer break.
Yes, we're going on a break.
We're both very excited. We will be back early September, date TBD. But if you want more Phoebe and Jacques while we're gone, we have a whole Patreon full of uncut and bonus episodes that you can go take a look at. Also support the pod so that we can get paid to keep making the stuff here, and so that I can keep going into. I spent so long researching today because I just I love it. I love this stuff. I love talking about it. And like I said, there's like at least 40 different episodes that we could write in here, but I wanted to just touch on the iceberg, so to speak.
Ooh, interesting choice of words. I think that yes, follow us at Do You Ever Pod. Reach out to us during this time. And I guess too, I don't know, you can cut out what I'm about to say. Are we going to put the ad for BVD that we made in this episode?
Sure, if I remember to do that.
I was also going to say, you know, and we're still around. Like, you know, if you are interested,
we are still around
in collaboration, facilitation, creative direction, you know, being, you know, in the Do You Ever media world, you know, we're still around.
We are still around. Just no new free things are going out basically right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But new free in September.
Yes. Yes, see you in September. Well, thanks very much, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Phoebe. Love you.
Okay, love you. Bye. Thank you for listening to Do You Ever Feel Like?
Follow this chaos wherever you get your podcasts.
Our artwork is by Simon Peng. Do You Ever Feel Like is produced by Jacqueline Wills
and Phoebe Taylor. You can follow us on Instagram at DoYouEverPod.
You can write to us at doyoueverpod@gmail.com. Okay,